Well, Elon Musk is calling for an end to the European Union. He was tweeting about that a lot over the weekend. Here is just one example. The EU should be abolished and sovereignty returned to individual countries so that governments can better represent their people. Now, this little BS community note that you see there, it says each member state is sovereign. It feels like a joke.
That's hilarious.
I mean, I am a community note voter, but I can't put them in myself. I don't have that clout yet. And I voted those down. I was like, live in Europe before you actually say that each...
Yeah, you mean to tell me that the Portuguese can do whatever they want without having to call Mother Brussels to get an approval on this, or Spain, or any of these? Give me a break.
No, the Portuguese put into place a program where you could come into their country, you know, as a non-habitual tax resident, and Brussels got really irked about it, and they had to increase the rules for that. No, they cannot do what they want. I could speak a blue streak about the way that each EU state is not sovereign, but that's not the point of this. The point is whether or not Elon Musk can actually inspire some kind of revolution that is good for the people of Europe. Because, of course, the EU makes life worse for every European citizen that's not part of the elite. But is this the hero we want, right? Elon Musk, the last time he said truth bombs about politics, we all got burned, right? And so... does the EU then have to do this for themselves? Do they have an Elon Musk character? If they do, we wouldn't know about it because they're busy censoring that person. The context for this is that the European Union is trying to slap this major fine on X under the Digital Services Act. They allege that X failed to comply with their safety provisions. Of course, this is not about safety. This is about censorship. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said as much on X. But again, what can the people of Europe actually do? Joining us to discuss is one of those people, Ralph Scholhammer, host of the Hammer Time show on YouTube, a real European, maybe not an Elon Musk character, but someone who has been calling for a similar revolution. So what do you make of this, Ralph? Is this a revolution you want to follow?
Well, it's been a while that somebody called me one of those people, so I'm not entirely sure what to make.
You are of the working class in Europe. You're of the people.
She was just profiling you, Ralph. I don't know if you caught that.
No, as you can tell, I put on my white collar shirt, so I'm already rising up through the ranks. No, but on a more serious note, yes, I think this was a quite interesting week because the fine against X and Elon Musk's tweets coincided, which I'm sure that many of you have read, with the new national security strategy that was published by the White House.
Yes.
And I would say that the tone vis-a-vis Europe is one of you either grow a spine or will drop you. And what I find most remarkable is, and I think this triggered everybody in Brussels, that it said that the US government, I'm paraphrasing here, that the US government will support patriotic movements in Europe. So basically right-wing movements. And I think the first step of the revolution you mentioned, Natali, hopefully will take place at the voting booth. European people have increasingly voted for reform-oriented and revolutionary parties. Revolution is the wrong term, but let's say more revolutionary parties. You have Reform in the UK, where I think the name gives it away. You have the Freedom Party in Austria. You have the AfD in Germany. So something is afoot. But the fun part is, what I really enjoy, is that this is for the first time that a US administration is openly siding with the opposition in Europe. Ironically, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, you remember when back in the day during Barack Obama's presidency, we had all these color revolutions in Eastern Europe and they were cheered on by the Europeans and the US administration. I think a little bit what Trump and Vance are trying to do is to have a color revolution light in Europe and saying we can no longer work with the people in charge. We need to support potential alternatives. And I think that's a step in the right direction.
But you bring up what Trump, I thought it was unprecedented. And I frankly didn't think that it got very much coverage at all. Maybe you could blame the Thanksgiving holiday on this. But what Trump's new policy is an extension of the Monroe Doctrine. They're calling it the Trump Corollary. And they spelled it out. And in that document basically says that Europe civilizationally has 20 years left before it collapses. I mean, they're specifically saying China, Russia, and the United States. Those are the three players. Europe, you're kind of done. You're kind of done. Your globalist policies, your liberal globalist policies have essentially destroyed your continent. No, I thought it was actually pretty stunning.
No, I think it's about 29 pages, so it's a very brisk read. It's a remarkable document. Exactly what you say. It openly says, and I think that 20 years is quite generous. I would say we are in the last inning. We have 5 to 10 years left at best. One huge issue that they mention, and that is correct, and Europeans, the people of Europe, or Western Europe to be more precise, have been saying this now for almost 30 years, that mass migration has to stop. It has altered the character of nations that still exist as a continuity, on a map, on a globe, but the character of those nations has been altered beyond recognition. When you look at the cities, when you look at at what's going on in schools, what's going on in public spaces, you have no-go areas in Sweden, you have bomb attacks in Stockholm. Recently, there was a case now just a few days ago in London where a girl was raped by 2 asylum seekers, where the what do you call it? The general attorney said that they cannot publish the material because if people would see it, they recorded it with their cell phones, there would be public riots. So this is something that the people of Europe have been complaining about for a long time. But for the most part, American politicians sided with those who are responsible for it. And Trump advanced are the first ones who say, no, we bet on the wrong horse for the last 30 years, and now we're going to do something different. And I think it is a step in the right direction. The change will be painful, it will be difficult, but at least now there is a debate and a conversation about it. Finally, people are openly saying, man, I think we did a lot of things wrong over the last 20 years, because you couldn't say this, as Natali correctly pointed out, because you were immediately framed as a Nazi and a fascist, and you had, as in Germany, right, the police would knock at your door at 8 a.m. and they wouldn't arrest you, so that's the thing, but they would confiscate your cell phone for 10 days or for 2 months, and they would confiscate your laptop, right, and the banks would debank you, as it happened to Martin Sellner and others. So I'm glad that finally some light is being shined on what's going on.
Now, you said that you think that Europeans can take control through elections, but they don't elect the European Union leaders. They only elect their own leaders, and those leaders are under the thumb of Ursula von der Leyen, who refuses to withdraw power. So if these new politicians refuse to invoke Article 50, which is the Brexit path, we're leaving the European Union, this is not good for us, we're going to go it alone, we don't want to be saddled with your debt. If they refuse that, then what does this slow march to decline look like? And what will it look like after it implodes? Separate nation states once again?
Well, I know, and this is no disrespect, so please don't misunderstand me. I know that the Americans tend to be, let's say, more inclined, more positively inclined towards revolutions, because your revolution was quite a success. So we have a very positive memory of it. In Europe, if you look at the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and other revolutions, usually, or at least very often, what happened after the revolution turned out to be worse than what was going on before the revolution. And even the most right-wing, or let's say the right-wing parties that really have a shot of coming into power or are in power, like Viktor Orban in Hungary, for example, they talk about reforming the European Union, giving back more responsibilities to the nation states, strengthening sovereignty, but really completely dissolving the European Union is not in anybody's program. I mean, there are some French parties, don't get me wrong, but the main right-wing parties, with the exception of Reform UK, are not necessarily calling for the dissolution of the European Union. And as you saw, that's a very important point. Brexit is a great example that even if you leave the European Union, if your leaders, if your political elites have the EU mindset, it doesn't matter if you're part of the EU or not. So
no, that's not a success. Yeah.
Right. So I'd rather have a reform. I mean, I'm open for everything, but I'd rather have a reformed EU where really the people who think like I do, like you do, who are patriotic, who understand that it is good for small nations to cooperate on some issues, but it's also necessary to have sovereignty and your own individual paths on other issues. If they form, let's call it a kind of, you can call it a league of Europeans, and whatever you want to call it. But I think the complete dissolution, we are not there yet. But as always, anything can happen.
If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. And unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275,000. And the best part? It's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more if you become their client. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. You can visit forthepeople.com/redacted, or you can click the link in the description to get started. Well, and it needs to be rebuilt on democratic principles. And it's gotten so far away, of course, from free speech, the idea of, and I mean, Germany just, I think this past week, if I'm not mistaken, passed a new law basically allowing police to install spyware inside of private homes. Like, can just go in, install spyware inside of your home. We're not talking about your browser, your internet browser, but like in buildings. So, we're moving way, way far away from democratic principles in Europe. It needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, right?
But as you said, I'm very glad you mentioned this. I mean, this is all Berlin's doing. Like, this is, and I have no patience for what's going on in Brussels. But the very example, which is an important one that you just mentioned, this is coming from Berlin. It was I think on 60 Minutes. People can Google it and they find it. They were doing interviews with the German prosecutors for hate speech and hate crimes and all these things. And they talked to 2 or 3 of those prosecutors, and they openly said, very often people don't get punished because, these paragraphs about hate speech are very tricky, but they get blackmailed. They get their phones confiscated. So the state is punishing them. The process becomes the punishment. So they drag you through court. It costs you money. You get socially ostracized and all these things. And this is the kind of censorship we have in Europe now. It increasingly gets like, but it's not like the heavy-handed censorship where somebody says, you cannot say this. It is more like, oh, you can say this, but then the police will visit you, will confiscate your phone. We supervise or we monitor your internet traffic, all these kind of things. But this is very often coming from states like Germany who do it individually. Then Brussels jumps on the bandwagon. That's absolutely true. But this is my worry when we say, okay, if Germany would leave the EU, or take the better example, take Great Britain, freedom of speech, freedom of consciousness is in a horrible condition in the UK, but they're no longer part of the European Union. So sometimes I feel that the politicians that do evil things then just use Brussels as an excuse, but very often they are the ones responsible.
Okay, so your final thoughts on Elon Musk and his sentiment, given that he is not a citizen of the EU, he's not a resident of the EU, he's just pontificating from across the pond. Is that welcomed? What do you think? What's your reaction to it?
What everyone thinks about Elon Musk, he did something that was unimaginable just a couple of years ago. And I think he had huge influence, at least in this area, on the current US administration, which is that so-called fringe parties and far-right parties, and again, I say so-called far-right parties, he made them acceptable. Right, you can now talk to the AfD, you can talk to the FPÖ in Austria, you can talk to Nigel Farage's reform, and there's the true sense that, wait a moment, we actually do have a choice, that we have been gaslit into believing that you can always only vote for the same people, the same parties, the same programs that are responsible for decline. And I think in this respect, he did a wonderful job. We have also to admit, you know this better than I do, that of course, as the song goes by Johnny Cash, I fought the law and the law won. I think in the case of Elon Musk, he fought the deep state and the deep state won, because I think the reforms he wanted to accomplish in the US, Doge and all of this, I'm not saying it had no effect, but it was not the kind of reform I think that he himself was aiming for.
No, and a lot of it got USAID and other things were rolled into the State Department under Marco Rubio, so it's not exactly...
And that's, if you allow me a last point, and this is the problem, right? I mean, in the same in Europe, if you have a bureaucratic behemoth being built up over 50, 60 years, and then say, okay, we got to tear it all down and rebuild it in 2-3 years. I mean, this is something that is so difficult. So I know many people are dissatisfied with Trump and all that, and I understand it. But we should always keep in mind that the task he set out to accomplish is a truly Herculean task, to reverse many of the wrong-headed policies of decades. And he hasn't even been in office for a year. I think we should give him a little bit more time and cut him some slack. If I as a foreigner, I'm allowed to pontificate on what's going on your side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this policy paper was huge, and I think you're putting it down, and it's not like something he said off the cuff, like on Air Force One. Yeah. Like he's, a reporter just asked him. It's in a policy paper that he believes Europe is dead in 20 years. Like, I'm still kind of shocked by it, but yeah, we'll be watching. Ralph, always great to see you. Ralph Scholhammer joining us.
Thank you so much
from Austria today. Thank you as always. Great to see you, Ralph.
Thanks.
So I just want to.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, you try,
We don't want to piss the crickets off. You know what I mean?
Fact checked in real time.
that's true, but I'm always
Can we
taught.
censor this?
Yeah, we'll edit it out in post.
Well, something that I always think when Ralph talks, like he's got such a command of English idioms and it's not his first language. I could not do this even in Portuguese or in Spanish, like the sayings that you're able to use. So sometimes you're going to get wrong.
I'm gonna find. I'm sure that there must be a cover version of Johnny Cash or something. So I have to redeem myself somehow.
I'll dig in deeper.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, guys. Great seeing you. Let's do this again soon.
Thanks, Ralph. Great to see you.